Ladies and gentlemen, this is a story that came out in the BBC and it raised a very interesting issue. Now, we know low birth rate has been going on globally, and now there are more grandparents in the world than grandchildren. I tell you, so many things are coming out now. For the first time in history, there are more elderly people in the world than young children, according to the United Nations. Their figures show that the number of over 65s surpass that of under 5 at the end of 2018. There are now around 705 million people over 65 on the planet, while those ages 0 through 4 number about 680 million. Widening gap. Current trends point to growing disparity between the oldest and the youngest by 2050. There will be more than two over 65s for each one age 0 through 4. Wow. So there's literally going to be elderly people with either no or very few grandchildren on this planet. This widening gap symbolizes a trend that demographers have been tracking for decades in most countries. We are all living longer and not making enough babies. But how will this affect you? Could it already be doing so? Not enough arrivals. Christopher Murphy, director of the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington, says there will be very few children and lots of people over the age of 65, and that makes it very difficult to sustain global society. Yeah, it's going to be very difficult for the people that are currently in charge, ladies and gentlemen. That's what their concerns are. See, you may be hanging on for a brief moment, but if you are not making enough babies for another generation, you are diminishing your power on the planet, and you won't have it for long. Okay, Murphy is also the author of a 2018 paper. So he's suggesting that half of all countries in the world are facing a baby bust. Yeah, they're true. Africa sure ain't facing that. And you can see right here the percentage of over 65s in selected countries and regions. And as you can see, primarily Asians, European, you can see some South America. I recently read, probably during the time the caravans were going strong, that many of those people leaving out of those countries, they're facing low birth rate in South America as well. And you can see India, Iran, and parts of the Middle East. So the strongest, mainly European and Asian, where they have these populations over 65. In 1960, the world's fertility rate was almost 5 children per woman, according to the World Bank. Almost 60 years later, it has half to only 2.4. At the same time, the socioeconomic advances have benefited those who come into this country. In the 1960s, people lived on an average a little over 52 years. The life expectancy reached 72 years in 2017. That means we are all living longer and demanding more and more resources as we get older, increasing pressure in areas such as pensions and healthcare systems. Yep, the aging population problem is sharper in developed countries. They tend to have lower birth rates for a number of reasons, most likely linked to economic influence. Child mortality rates are lower, birth control is easily accessible, and raising children can be relatively expensive. Yeah, you notice they're not talking about anything biological, which we know that's what it is. In those nations, women often have children later in life or have fewer children or have no children. You know, I did a story probably 2 years ago and even a year ago of how there's a big population in Europe of single women that never been married and never had children. And that population of women are growing every single year. So, better standards of life mean people last longer in these countries. A prime example is Japan, where the life expectancy at birth is nearly 84 years, and where the over 65s mount at 27% of the total population in 2018, almost the most in the world. Its under 5 population share is around 3.85%. Wow, that is extremely low, according to the UN. So you got all of these old people and wow, hardly no children. This double challenge has been worrying Chinese authorities for decades. And last year, the government announced a compulsory rise in the retirement age from 65 to 70. Yeah, no wonder why they are whining about a lot of things. I did a story on the Japanese have to recruit old people into their military because there's not enough young people to recruit. Now I see what they mean. They literally don't have any young people there. And they're trying to raise their birth rate and give people free houses to anybody that gives birth to children. But see, none of these things are going to work because it is a genetic problem going on, not, oh, it's the economy. No, the economy is not doing that to them. They can't have babies because of genetic problems, but they're not going to talk about that. African countries dominate the rankings for high fertility. Niger, for instance, is the world's most fertile country with 7.2 births per woman in 2017. If you remember, Macron, the prime minister of France, went over there to tell the African people to stop having babies. He went to Africa to complain that they're having too many babies. Y'all keep having them babies, y'all. Y'all make that man so mad he had to fly all the way to Africa to point his finger at you. That means you're doing something right. Keep having them babies in Africa. However, the same nations have high child mortality or whatever. They're still having more babies than you. All right. There you go, right there. 7.2 births per woman. For population purposes, 2.1 is the magic number. It is the fertility rate that demographers say is necessary for populations to replace themselves. However, the most recent UN data shows that only a little over half of the world's countries procreate at that pace. 113. So out of this entire globe, y'all, only 113 countries are meeting the 2.1 replacement rate or better out of the whole globe. That says a lot right there. That's hardly nothing. 113 countries, when you think of all of the countries across this globe, that's nothing. That's extremely low. Okay. So let me just go down to this chart. All right. So if you look at the blue bars in this grandparents versus grandkids, the blue are children 5 and under. All right. And the red are the grandparents 65 and older. And look at the years here. And if you look at 2018, it's neck and neck right now. And by 2050, you can see it's going to be so few children in the world. And it's going to be all of these old people across the globe, 65 and older. I actually believe it's there now. You got to understand, these people are always lowballing numbers and trying to make you believe things aren't here yet that are here. So you got to take their charts and their reportings with a grain of salt. But just know there are more elderly people on this planet than there are young people. And many of the elderly people are actually living longer as well. But please tell me what you think about this, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell. And you know what the amazing thing is, y'all, before I go? Black people are living a lot longer too, you know? But you'll have people, oh, we live longer. And then when you go look, they barely live 3 years longer than us. They're pointing that out like that's some big deal. I had somebody do that, and I said, okay, now see, it's a big deal if you're living 10 and 20 years longer than black people, but barely 2 years is nothing to have bragging rights over, okay? Peace, family.